The Final Four is officially set, and we've got some unbelievable matchups. It's almost a guarantee we get a classic weekend of games, regardless of which side of the bracket is playing and regardless of which teams make the championship game. The first game I'd like to break down is the matchup between Louisville and South Carolina, as with this being their first matchup of the season, it's got me really intrigued about the matchups at play and the coaching decisions to be made. So, who wins this game? In today's video, I'll be taking a look at the Final Four matchup between the Louisville Cardinals and South Carolina Gamecocks and predicting the game's outcome, looking at each team's strengths and weaknesses, the X-Factor players on each squad, the keys to success, every little detail. Before we start, if you're new here and enjoy the video, be sure to subscribe. For more women's basketball content like this, I'm trying to reach 2,000 subscribers on this channel, so all support would be greatly appreciated. Anyway, with that being said, let's take a look at this Final Four matchup. Firstly, let's dive into the strengths and weaknesses for each team and why these areas matter against their respective opponent. Starting with South Carolina, their biggest strength is certainly their defense. Anchored by Aaliyah Boston, South Carolina have been a defensive monster all tournament long, allowing an average of just 41 points per game so far in March Madness. A lot of the defensive brilliance from this team comes from the interior defense, where Aaliyah Boston leads the charge, swatting away blocks on the regular and forcing teams into more difficult shots inside because of her length and size. It's a big reason why South Carolina have led the country in blocks per game all season long, and why their opponents shoot an average of just 32% from the field, also ranking the Gamecocks number 1 in the country in that category. This stigma will matter a lot against Louisville, as the Cardinals are a very diverse offensive unit, often finishing games with multiple players scoring in the double digits. Louisville is a great ball movement team, like Creighton was, but if South Carolina's defense can make them rush their shots, like it did for the Blue Jays, I think they'll be able to win this game. Another strength for South Carolina is their interior offense, and I'd go as far as saying that simply having Aaliyah Boston on their squad is a major strength as well, especially for this matchup against Louisville. The height differential between Louisville and South Carolina is quite significant overall, and South Carolina's talls have been the most impactful players so far this tournament for them, whether that's Aaliyah Boston, Saxton, etc. So I think this is a strong area for South Carolina and one that will be very important, but I'll discuss this in a bit more depth later. A big weakness for South Carolina though is their 3-point shooting. They've been very inconsistent from deep all season long, but if they can take advantage of their elite paint offense, they should be able to cancel this weakness out. With an interior dominant lineup, the Gamecocks aren't really known for shooting the ball from deep at a high volume, nor at an efficient clip, with players like Cook and Henderson often inconsistent from that range. But again, if Boston does have a night out from the low block and they make the most of what she brings to the table, it should be enough for them to get past Louisville. Louisville, of course, have their strengths of their own, and arguably their biggest strength is also their defense. Thanks to the great coaching of Jeff Walz, the Cardinals' defense is extremely cohesive and is executed extremely well on a regular basis. Though the offense can sometimes lack for Louisville, their defensive identity keeps them in games, and their tenacity on that end will be extremely important against South Carolina. One of Louisville's best defensive games on the season was against Notre Dame, where they completely shut down the Irish's offense in the third quarter to walk away with a blowout win. In that game, they shut down the ball movement of Notre Dame and forced their guards into isolations more often. While I don't think that exact game plan can be applied to South Carolina, some elements of it certainly can. If tough, physical defenders like Hailey Van Lith and Emily Engsler can step up defensively and pressure the ball handler, such as Zia Cook, they'll be able to limit the entries into the post for Aaliyah Boston. In turn, this will force Cook, for example, to create individually, and while she is solid at that, I think the more contested mid-ranges the Cardinals can force, the better chances of them are winning this game. Sometimes, South Carolina's offense can stumble a bit under pressure, and if Louisville's defensive game plan is executed well enough, they'll give themselves every possible chance to win this game. Personally, I don't think this is a game Louisville win off their offense, it's about their defense, so it's got to continue to be elite if they want to win this game. As I mentioned before though, Louisville's next strength is their team play. The Cards run a very diverse, dynamic and versatile offense where almost anyone on the floor at all times can create with the ball in hand. That kind of ball movement and unpredictability will be useful for throwing SC's defense out of sorts, especially if players like Van Lith can attack downhill and get to the cup strongly, potentially getting a player like Boston in foul trouble. Against Creighton, South Carolina were leaving some major gaps in the defense, but the intimidation factor of Boston forced the Blue Jays to rush their attempts. If Louisville can better punish those gaps, that can be exploited and overcome Boston's presence at least somewhat, I think they stand a good chance at winning this game. However, one big weakness for Louisville is their rebounding, as they really only have one standout big to compete with Boston and Saxton and the others on SC, and that player is Olivia Cochran. Against the best rebounding player in the country, that factor is especially concerning, and if other players don't step up to crash the boards, I think Louisville might be in for a rough time. Aaliyah Boston really has the potential to absolutely dominate this game. But those are the strengths and weaknesses for each team. Now let's take a look at a player on each team that could elevate their side to the championship game, or potentially hurt them if they don't play well. Essentially, who is their X factor? For South Carolina, it's got to be Destiny Henderson. Henny absolutely balled out in the Elite 8, starting the game 4 for 4 from the field and finishing the match with an efficient 12 points. Her ability to put the ball in the basket early and punish the Creighton defense for trying to double Aaliyah Boston really made things difficult for the Blue Jays, and that level of efficiency when scoring really made the offense so much easier to come by for South Carolina as the game wore on. However, we've seen her be inefficient earlier in the tournament, particularly in the Miami game, and that's when South Carolina couldn't even score 50 points. In the Final Four, that level of scoring is asking to be eliminated. So for South Carolina's offense to be versatile and at the dangerous level they can be at, they absolutely need Henderson at her best, especially against a defense like Louisville's. As for Louisville, I'm saying Hailey Van Lith is their X factor. Van Lith has been sensational this tournament, currently on a hot streak of 20-point games. I was a bit skeptical of the Cardinals coming into this tournament, just because I wasn't sure how their offense would fare on the big stage. I've seen their defense step up, but could their offense take it to a new level too? Hailey Van Lith has been the biggest reason to why it has, breaking out into a genuine superstar the last few games, with her Elite 8 performance by far her best, scoring 22 points on 9 for 15 shooting from the field. Hailey's hustle is inspiring, her physicality as a guard is unmatched by anyone in the country, and her ability to score from all three levels is a dangerous combination to come up against. If she's again at her best and can finish through the contact South Carolina's bigs will undoubtedly bring, her impact could be what sends Louisville to the championship game. There are so many things to love about Van Lith's play recently. I'll probably make a full detailed analysis on her soon, because it's crazy to see how much she's improved since her freshman season. But just to keep it brief, Van Lith will be a difficult player to contend with on Friday for the Gamecocks, and it's why I think she can make or break Louisville's chances this week. Finally, before we get into my final prediction, what is the key to winning the game for each team? For South Carolina, it's getting Olivia Cochran in foul trouble, with Cochran being the only player I can see competing with Boston's strength. The more fouls she gets placed on her, the harder it will be for her to compete with Boston. The longer she has to rest because of foul trouble, the easier things will be for Boston to dominate inside and for South Carolina to get what they want offensively. It's really as simple as that. As for Louisville, they need to try to force South Carolina into a more perimeter-based game. I know it's a lot easier said than done, but I'd much rather have Henderson and Cook shooting 15 times a game than Boston from inside the paint. As for defense, you've got to try draw Boston out of the paint as much as possible. Otherwise, it's going to be extremely difficult to score. It's going to be very interesting to see what kind of game plan Louisville throws at South Carolina and Boston in particular, but it really has to limit her touches and get it out the paint. Boston's impact alone could seal Louisville's fate. But with that all being said, who wins this game? Louisville or South Carolina? In my eyes, I think South Carolina are too tall and strong for Louisville to handle, so I have the Gamecocks winning this by around 10 points. While the diverse Louisville offense could hurt South Carolina, I think they'll make it very difficult to score, as they have all tournament long. It'll be a defensive grindfest. Unfortunately for Louisville, I don't really see anyone truly containing Boston, and even if she is shut down somewhat, it's very hard to see them matching up well on the other talls like Saxton. A tall lineup from South Carolina could prove to be extremely effective. It's just a bit of a defensive mismatch for Louisville on paper, which I think will make a win for them quite challenging. I'm not saying it's impossible. Louisville's defense this season has proven they can take it up to teams like South Carolina in a situation like this, but on paper again, I struggle to see the Cardinals getting up because of some of the mismatches South Carolina's roster may cause. So for that reason, I have SC going through to the championship game. But that will conclude my preview of this upcoming Final Four game. What do you guys think of this? Who do you have winning between Louisville and South Carolina? What players are going to be the difference makers? Let me know all your thoughts down in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave it a like and subscribe. But with that being said, I will see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Thank you.